back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. In our journey through history, let's take a look at the man behind the popular holiday we know today as Valentine's Day. Every February 14th, couples give gifts and go out to romantic dinners to celebrate their love. But why do we do it on that day? And who was the Saint Valentine that the holiday is named after? Well, let's travel back to ancient Rome today and explore the man behind the holiday, a Christian martyr whose name became synonymous with all things romance, the historical Saint Valentine. Now, history actually tells us of multiple men who are remembered as Saint Valentine, but the one we attribute the holiday to was a Christian churchman from Rome who likely lived sometime in the 3rd century AD. Now, remember what's happening in the world at this time. The Roman Empire, having hit its height at the end of the 2nd century AD, is beginning to collapse. The empire was simply too big to rule, and enemies from outside, as well as uprisings within, began to chip away at its foundation. Now, this was also a brutal time for the Christian church. Christians were pushed to the margins, beaten, exiled, and murdered for their faith in Christ, which Rome saw as a crime against the state. Worshipping a deity other than the Roman pantheon or cult of emperors was a punishable offense, often so by death. Now, this brings us to Saint Valentine, who we actually know very little about, except where he lived, his faith, and some traditions that have come about from his death. We don't know too much about him. But the most reliable story about the legacy of Saint Valentine speaks actually to the end of his life. He had allegedly served as a secret priest, performing weddings for underground Christians. Some sources indicate that Valentine did this to protect young Christian men from being drafted into the Roman army, which certain marital laws would have actually done this, so getting married would have protected young men from having to serve. Valentine was imprisoned for his faith and condemned to death, possibly for his pastoral work, which helped lead a family to faith in Christ. Now, while awaiting his execution, he became friends with the daughter of his prison guard, and some traditions indicate that Valentine had miraculously healed this young woman who had been blind and restored her sight. While awaiting his execution, he and the young woman exchanged letters, and tradition has it, Valentine signed his final letter before his execution, "From your Valentine," leading to the popular Valentine's Day greeting that we use today. Valentine was executed most likely by beheading on February 14th, sometime in the late 3rd century AD. Now, we skip ahead to the 1300s, where we see the first overt connection between this Christian martyr and the idea of romantic love from the English writer Geoffrey Chaucer, who wrote the Canterbury Tales. He christened the day as a day of romance for both humans and, interestingly, animals in his poem, Parliament of Fowls. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.